So I had a night to myself the other night. My husband had to go on a trip to go pick up his new work truck, and I decided to make the most of it by popping some popcorn, slapping on a Korean face mask, and queuing up My Bloody Valentine on Prime. Because who doesn't love a good old cheesy slasher on solo girls' night? I have loved this movie for a very, very long time. Like, I have the DVD kind of long time. I actually think it's even a Blu ray DVD. But even as someone who loves this movie, I am completely aware that it is bad. But in my opinion, that somehow just makes it better. The acting, horrible. The plot, completely nonsensical. Dialogue, well, let's just say human beings don't talk like this.
You can go back to that place where it all went wrong and find your way again.
And yet, I love this movie with all of my heart. I don't know what it is about this specific genre. Like, usually with horror movies, I'm kind of a wimp. But give me a bad slasher and a beer, and I am in it. Now, despite this being a bad movie, it also has a few things that are actually really working for it, and I'm excited to talk about it with you guys. Before we get into it, yes, I have seen the 1981 original. It was a long time ago, and I didn't really like it at the time. Maybe I was too young, I don't know. I did watch this video from Rockland Graves Productions on the '09 remake, and in it he was kind of comparing the two, and he was really talking up the original. I really like Rockland Graves, so it kind of made me feel like I need to give the original another shot. So before anyone comes after me for liking the remake, I will give the original another try. I just haven't gotten there yet. There are spoilers for both the '81 and '09 versions of this movie in this video, so if you haven't seen them and you are wanting to go in spoiler free, this is your sign to skedaddle. So the My Bloody Valentine remake starts off with a great big exposition dump. I'm not against exposition dumps in general, but there's actually some pretty interesting stuff in here that they're just completely glossing over. The story goes that there was an explosion in a mine after little old Tom here, whose dad owns the mine, forgot to bleed lines. I don't know what that means. I know nothing about mining. But anyway, a few miners got trapped in this tunnel, and this was obviously a very big deal for this town. There was a search to try and recover the trapped miners, and when they found them, only one was left alive, Harry Warden. Now, as it turns out, everyone who was trapped down there with Harry Warden did not die of natural causes, if you catch my drift. Harry was looking to buy himself a little more time by not having these freeloaders use up the oxygen. So Harry is ultimately rescued, but he falls into a coma, and he is comatose in the hospital for a year. Now, given that Harry Warden is the villain of this movie, I think it would have been really interesting to see all of this intro actually played out. I want to know more about Harry and what kind of person he was. We get one scene of him kind of being a dick to Tom, and that's pretty much all we have to go off for his character. Based off this tiny little clip, it also seems like he kind of just doesn't really like Tom for some reason. And I would have liked to have seen that explored a bit more, considering that this history between them is the literal core of the movie. But moving on, Harry wakes up in the hospital a year later, on Valentine's Day, naturally, and he's got a real bee in his bonnet over this whole Tom explosion situation. And he would like to find Tom and have a little heart to heart with him about it. Get it? Because he cuts out people's hearts. Unfortunately for everyone else in this town, anyone in Harry's path on his way to Tom is fair game. And this is where some backstory on Harry would have really come in handy, because this just doesn't really make sense to me. In the original, the whole trapped miners situation was a little more gruesome. They were trapped for much longer, long enough that Harry eventually needed to find something to eat. And by the time that he's been found, it's very clear that he has been driven mad by this situation, understandably. Now, in the remake, there really isn't any kind of emphasis on Harry's mental state. Well, I think he's definitely entitled to a bit of a snap after what he's been through. The movie doesn't really acknowledge this as a reason for his killing spree. They just kind of play it off like, well, he was always kind of an asshole. That is not the same thing, my dude. Elsewhere in town, a bunch of teenagers are having a Valentine's Day party at the mine. And honestly, one of the funniest things in this movie is these 30-year-olds trying to look like high school students. Cinema gold. I think this chick's voice is the best part.
Sorry to tell you, sweetie, but Tom's the love of her life.
There's no way that's the voice of a 17-year-old. So Harry shows up and offs pretty much everyone except for like 3 people. He gets hold of Tom, who is abandoned by his friends and girlfriend. Cold guys. Just as he's about to get his revenge, the cops show up and he runs off. It's presumed that he died in a cave-in, but his body is never recovered. After this, we jump 10 years into the future. Tom's girlfriend Sarah is now married to Axel, the guy who was always in love with her, and Tom is returning to town to sell the mine after the death of his father. Obviously, everyone is very upset over this. The livelihood of this town kind of depends on this mine. We also learn upon Tom's arrival that no one has heard from him for the past 10 years. After the Valentine's Day massacre, he just disappeared, and even his father didn't know where he was. Eventually, everyone just kind of assumed he was dead. But now that he's back, things start to unravel. A lot of people blame him for what happened because he caused the explosion that ultimately led to Harry going crazy. His ex never really had the chance to get over him, considering she never even knew what happened to him, causing stress in an already strained marriage. And poor Tom here just wants to get in and out as quickly as possible. Until, after a little heart to heart with his ex lady friend, he decides that maybe it's best he keep the mine and stay in town. For reasons. Now, something that I have to say is that the editing in this movie is super wonky. When someone finishes saying something, they immediately cut to the other person answering,
Want to come in and have a drink?
Yeah, okay.
and it just makes the dialogue feel super clunky, on top of the fact that the dialogue is already not very good. I don't know if they were trying to cut down the runtime or what, but I don't think the extra seconds they were saving was worth it. On the other hand, something that I think is kind of cool is how they use the same song several times throughout the movie, kind of remixing it for different scenes. Like how I Was Made for Loving You was used in The Fall Guy. It's just a little tune that was written for the movie, but it's kind of neat. So after deciding to stay, Tom heads to the mine to tell someone, I think his name's Ben, that he's decided not to sell. I don't know why he needs to do this. Can't he wait until the guy's off work? And isn't it the person he's selling it to that he would need to tell? But anyway, it leads to one of the coolest scenes in the movie, so I'm fine with it. Tom is escorted down into the mine by Red, who he'd had an altercation with the night before. And while Red is calling Ben, Tom wanders off, as you do, and ends up getting attacked and locked into a cage by Harry Warden, leading to this shot. Now, honestly, this scene kind of gave away the ending for me. It's when I first started to suspect what was happening, but I'll get into that more once we get there. So Tom has to watch Red get pickaxed, and then Harry Warden disappears, and he's rescued by a bunch of guys who automatically blame him for what has happened again, despite the fact that he was literally locked in a cage when they found him. Now, Tom is convinced that Harry Warden is back and coming after him again, but Axel, Sarah's husband, is unconvinced because he knows that his dad, along with Tom's dad and Ben, tracked Harry down after the events at the mine 10 years ago and shot him. So, to try and convince everyone that the killer couldn't possibly be Harry, they go on a little field trip out to where his body is supposedly buried, only to find that he's no longer there. It's important to note that Axel, who is the sheriff, is really trying to push Tom as the killer. Not just because he's been at the scene of both of the murders so far, but because, well, the guy's trying to steal his wife. But unfortunately, he just doesn't have anything to pin on him other than suspicion and jealousy, so he has to let him go. Tom goes to try and find Harry to prove that he's not crazy, and later that night, Sarah gets attacked and Axel's mistress is killed. Tom picks Sarah up from the hospital because, in his search for Harry, he has begun to suspect that someone else might be the killer. Axel. While they're in the car, Axel calls Sarah to tell her that he thinks Tom is the killer because he's been in a mental institute for the past 10 years. So all of this culminates down in the mine with a classic who's the killer standoff. Now, in the original, it actually is Axel who's the killer, because he saw his dad get killed by Harry Warden when he was a child, and that was obviously very traumatizing. But in the remake, it's Tom. It turns out that Tom has a split personality, and even he didn't know that he was the killer. I do like the change-up of having Tom be the killer. It does make more sense to me, given that he was personally attacked by Harry Warden, and he feels responsible for the deaths of all of those people, all of his friends. I don't remember in the original if Axel actually thinks that he is Harry Warden, but in the remake, it is very clearly laid out that Tom's other personality is Harry Warden.
He's here. Aren't you, Harry? You living inside, Tom?
And if that's true for the original too, then given both Tom and Axel's histories with Harry, Tom makes more sense to me as the killer. I know it's a little cliche, but I actually do like the split personality twist. Even though I did start to suspect that Tom and Harry were the same person after this scene, I did continue to second guess myself because the two were often in the same place at once. and Harry would go after people that Tom would never hurt, like Sarah. And an extra nice touch is that Harry is actually setting Tom up to believe that he's innocent. After attacking Red, he cuts his own arm and locks himself in the cage so that when Tom wakes back up, he's going to think that he got attacked and his brain will just kind of fill in what happened. Something I never noticed on my own, but that was pointed out in Rockland Graves' video, is that in this scene, the sound of Tom hitting the door of the cage and the sound of Harry axing Red are timed together. So they're always hitting at the same time, which is just kind of another neat little detail pointing to them being the same person. I also really like the rushing sound we hear every time Tom splits. Throughout the movie, before we know that he's the killer, we see Tom taking these prescription pills. And it always happens after this rushing sound, and it looks like he's almost having a panic attack of sorts. And we assume that the meds are to help with anxiety or PTSD after what happened to him. But if you've seen the end and you go back and watch it again, you notice that this actually always happens before Harry comes out. And it's just another one of those things that the movie actually did well. It's not a good movie, but it does have some neat ideas. Now, lastly, we gotta talk about Jensen. Jensen Ackles squeezed this movie out between filming seasons of Supernatural, and while he has made it very clear that he loved his time on Supernatural, it was kind of a blessing and a curse for him, in my opinion. He had great job security, but he also had to turn down a lot of big opportunities, which stopped him from ever getting taken really seriously as an actor. He seldom got the chance to take on other roles, and when he did, they didn't usually do him any favors, as was the case with this movie. It wasn't until Supernatural ended and he got a part on The Boys that people started to go, wow, okay, this guy's actually pretty good. Because people saw him do something different and do it very well.
I didn't mean to hurt those people. I'm not a bad guy.
So while I do think that Jensen is very talented, this movie was not the greatest showcase for that. There's one scene where it's kind of like, okay, he's alright, but the rest of it is just so awkward. No one can pull off this dialogue, not even with Jensen's skill and charisma. So that's My Bloody Valentine, a bad movie with some genuinely neat ideas. If you've seen either the original or the remake, I would love to hear what you thought of them down in the comments. If you made it to the end of this video, please be sure to give it a like. I am currently at 35 subscribers and trying to get up to 50, so you should really help a girl out and hit the subscribe button if you love movies as much as I do. Okay,